All right. Good morning. Welcome, everybody. My name is Eli Storch, chair of the Design Advocacy Group, and we appreciate you coming out and joining us for our November monthly meeting. Hard to believe we're at the end of the year, but we are. So we are thrilled to have everyone with us. We have a very busy docket today, but let's jump in. We have a bunch of advocacy items, things that we want to get across and share, as well as uh, our excellent panel today. So, with that, if you have anything you want to share with us, any events, upcoming announcements, activities, exhibitions, all sorts of good stuff, please throw it in the chat. And we will ask you to raise your hand and tell us a little about it. So I'm going to jump into a few advocacy items. We have a few folks who want to share some things, and we'll go around the horn. First off, SEPTA is not in the best condition. I think everyone has seen that news, that there's significant funding gaps that need closing, and that funding is not imminently arriving. So from the folks that we've reached out to, the one thing you can do is, by whatever channels you are able, call on the governor to flex federal funding to support SEPTA ASAP. That's kind of the one and best thing we can do right now. There will be further funding fights and conversations that will take place in 2025, but in the short term, that's kind of the lever that's available to us and to the governor. So by whatever means you have, please make some noise about that, and hopefully we can get Governor Shapiro to move some things around. Equally interesting and a little depressing, the 76th place hearings have begun in City Council, have not gotten off to the best start in terms of getting answers to some key details, but we certainly have heard that the Sixers and the mayoral administration are inflexible on the CBA, which I know was a big issue for council member Squilla, and certainly pushed back hard on that. So there's more to come as that fight continues. And then as it relates specifically to SEPTA, the Sixers confirmed that they are not willing to fund anything outside of the immediate envelope of their site. So anything related to Jefferson Station, they understand is their responsibility. And from there, anything from regional rail will be on SEPTA and not on the Sixers. So that is a really disheartening thing as this continues to unfold. One of the other big things that continues to come up is the lack of details around any construction scheduling, demolition scheduling, and there was an encounter with Councilmember Mike Driscoll talking about all the work that's being done to plan for 2026, and questions about business interruptions and service to Center City during 2026. And I'm quoting here from Aaron Moselle, who says that Alex Kaffenbaum, the head of development for Harris Blitzer Sports and Entertainment, told lawmakers the team would seek to minimize the impacts of the demolition process, but assured them that it would be worth it. So those are the kind of details that we have on this project. A lot of fuzzy details and things where we're being asked to just trust them that it will happen. So those hearings will continue. Folks will continue to weigh in, and we're going to be pushing City Council as hard as we can to demand information if they are indeed going to proceed on the proposed timeline. But it seems really, really inappropriate for them to vote on the Sixers proposed timeline without more details. So on the other end of the sporting lens, Xfinity Live got approvals to proceed with a $15 million expansion, which is a splashy, attractive looking indoor-outdoor piece that will add to Xfinity Live. I think it's it's a starting point. It's a very small starting point relative to the scale of the stadium district proposal that they're pushing. So we'll keep an eye on that as they hopefully come out with a much larger master plan that you can read about as they produce it. We gave them some design guidance. The DAG steering committee met with Comcast Spectacor and published a piece giving some guidance on what we thought needed to happen in order for them to have success in master planning for not only the buildings and within the stadium district, but also the region as they tie off and connect all the different points and locations around them. So speaking about some of those tie-offs, we were asked in our last meeting to dig in and opine a bit on the ongoing I-95 construction and plans for expansion and get into some of the details. So Nate, do you want to talk a little bit about the conversations we had and where that is?
Sure. So, hi, everybody. I'm Nate Hummel from University City District, also the DAG Steering Committee. We met with Chuck Davies, who's the District 6 sort of urban mastermind of 95, to try and get an understanding of what their opportunities and constraints were as they approach rebuilding the South Philly portions of 95. And I think as we tried to determine where we stand and what our position will be, we really wanted to get through the noise. There's been a lot of media coverage about kind of perceived or whatever misgivings to this process. I know personally from living in Fishtown during the whole rebuild of the Fishtown and Port Richmond section, a lot of things that the community was able to actually pry out of PennDOT to get some amenity space. And so we talked with Chuck about those types of things and what are some of the efforts that they made to accommodate the community in Fishtown and Port Richmond. That was about a 10-15 year process. What was kind of staggering is that this is thought to be something in the 2040s when they're going to be building this. So it's quite a long range plan. But the good news, I think, is that it's early in the process. So they're sort of in the feasibility possibilities section. And I think what we could probably do is help the folks of South Philly get the most they can out of what happens underneath the highway, and a way to try and add as many amenities to their community as possible. So we'll keep talking to others and trying to learn what other opportunities and constraints there are. It'd be great if we could talk to some folks in the community, see what they're worried about, and then do our part to help them understand what's possible. So we could talk more about this another time, but it was really helpful for us to go directly to the source, directly to PennDOT to get information instead of just taking it from various reports.
Do you want to follow up and talk a little bit more about some of the daylighting projects and work that you have on your docket?
Sure. Sure. So back in May, for those of you that attended, we had an in-person event called Take the Lane, where we talked about ways to kind of hack into the right of way, the space between the curbs, to try and make spaces safer for people. So not so much gathering spaces, not so much what we used to call pedestrian plazas, but areas that were just about reducing crossing distances and making things safer. And so we talked about that, a couple things that were in the works, and I'll show you an update of two of those projects that have come to life. What just happened there? It
Try
worked in
sharing
the
that again.
test. Yeah. There we go. So this is 49th and Catherine, sort of where Catherine and Baltimore kind of meet in Cedar Park neighborhood. This is what it looked like. We closed this down. It was a slip lane back in 2016, and it's gone through a couple different iterations. We had a sticker mural on there for a couple years, and it sort of faded. And the community asked us to come up with a new solution, and so we did, and we worked with a wonderful artist named Lauren Alice, and she did this incredible mural. We were asked by the community to find an artist that does things that are sort of plant-based, but not overtly plants, and animal-based, but not overtly animals. So I said, oh, okay, I'll find someone, and somehow we did. And she did a wonderful job. And we're going to debut this on Monday with elected officials, and we'll put some information out there, but it's really pretty incredible what she was able to do. I was introduced to the world of scribble grids. Um, Fascinating how that works. So we'll talk about that a little bit more. But so we've learned a lot about what makes these safe. So there's slip resistance is a thing, because if it gets wet, you can fall and we'll get sued. So these all have what's called shark grip in there. Um, and it worked out really well. Turns out, from the artist perspective, it destroys brushes, but makes it safer for the community, and think that's important. So that was 49th and Catherine. That's a more traditional place for people to hang out and something. But what we're really doing that I think is different is we're kind of creating, we sort of help the city think through a hybrid space. So it's not a pedestrian plaza. We're calling these daylighting plazas. So they basically non-permanent sidewalk extensions where you extend the sidewalk so people have a shorter crossing distance, but you do it with paint and planters and flex posts. You don't do it with concrete and storm drains, which costs $1 million per intersection. So we worked at 43rd and Spruce closely with the community to take care of this. And so what we did is we took 7 feet off the face of curb, which is what's given for the parking lane, and then wrap that around the curves, keeping the same radius. So the city did turning radius studies, and everything still works. The trash trucks could still come through there and all these good things. But we reduced the crossing distance by 14 feet. And this is particularly important at this location because of Penn Alexander School. So hundreds of little tiny legs are walking through this intersection every day. And we wanted to make it safer for them. We, through the wonderful DAG steering committee, were able to connect with a real rock star artist, Nick, who calls himself NDA Street Art. Kat Kendon on our committee connected us, and he's just been doing amazing. So laid out this grid a couple days ago. There he is, hard at work. You can see what a difference a coat of paint makes there. The progress here, I'm calling this a modern take on a Mondrian. He was very flattered by that. I love it. It's a street Mondrian. um, Many uses of foldable tables and chairs, by the way. They were serving as stanchions while we were laying this out. But he really is making great progress, kind of integrating the crosswalk right into it. And then our crew came in and was putting flex posts around the outer edge for the city code. And we will have planters arriving today that will be installed next week. So it's just real fun. This is 43rd and Spruce. You can come out and take a look at that anytime. This is the overall his scheme there. Any white dot is a planter. So I want to do this in more places, and I think we have figured out how to do this more easily. We've already submitted another one for the Powelton Village community at 36 and Race for a similar approach. And I'd really like this to be replicated across the city, all over the place. Again, not a place for hanging out. It's simply about safety. And then you add a mural so that it becomes an amenity to the community. It's not just some municipal white lines in an area. So those are our updates, and keep an eye on universitycity.org for more information on events and other things related to these projects.
Thank you, Nate. I think it's really, yeah, the I-95 conversation is very interesting because it's not a capacity increasing effort. It's about safety and making circulation better and improving upon what's there. It's not about new lanes and increasing capacity. So I think a lot of that got lost in the shuffle, and is a really critical point. So I appreciate you updating us on that. David Brownlee, do you want to give us an update on the Roundhouse?
Right. Well, as many of you know, a little more than a year ago, DAG prepared a public statement in support of the historic designation of the police administration building, noting its really great architectural significance as part of that. Well, really, that Philadelphia group of architectural thinking that bent the course of modern architecture in the early 1960s. And which hasn't and which also has, of course, an important and complicated place in Philadelphia's history. The nomination was prepared and it was put on hold by the Historical Commission until last Friday, when the 6 new appointees of the new administration voted not to accept the designation. It would turn to be a tie vote, but a tie vote does not stops the designation process. Disappointingly, there was really literally no meaningful discussion of the architectural importance of the building, or really of its complicated history, which, as most of you know, it was built as a component of Philadelphia's great reform agenda. It was tarnished by its use by Frank Rizzo and his regime. And it is been demonstrated by studies by the Preservation Alliance to be a very useful building. And it's certainly, I would say, one of the most distinctive looking big buildings in the city. It's a signature building, or could be. Well, those of you who are worried that Philadelphia has too much history, we have the opportunity. We're now going to erase some of it, so the management problem will be reduced, perhaps. It is still possible that an intelligent developer will acquire the site, which is what the city clearly intends, but an intelligent developer can get the building placed on the national register and reap the benefits of investment tax credits that come from developing a historic building. That's a possibility. And I think those of us who are interested in the building, they essentially have to keep telling the story of its really important position in our city's history. It's a building that we made, and I have to say, I think we own in every sense, physically and also intellectually. But the story of what this shows of the intentions of the present administration with respect to both historic preservation and more broadly to city planning, which is also seen in their treatment of the Sixers arena, is rather disquieting. So that's it.
Kathy, do you want to follow up on what you just said in the chat, as well as share a little bit about the Wagner Free Institute, if you want to make a really challenging pivot between those two?
Sure. I agree exactly with what David said. And I think the other point, aside from the building being an architectural landmark, a structural landmark, internationally studied and renowned, to me, in a way, the bigger point is that the city did an extensive public outreach process to gather public opinion, to address the fact that this is a really complicated building to love and to honor. And the result of that report, to be honest, a lot of the people in my preservation circles, when we heard that this report was coming, sort of thought, oh, great, here we go, another whitewash. It's actually a really great report. The city did a wonderful job. In fact, the report was recently recognized by an international planning association with a prize. So to me, the bigger piece here is that the public wishes are being completely dismissed. And that's, I think that speaks very well in parallel to the arena process, where the mayor has decided what she wants to do and she is not listening to anybody else. So that, I think, is something we have to be very concerned about. To pivot to happier news, many of you may know the Wagner Free Institute of Science. It is a Victorian era science museum, natural history museum based in North Philadelphia, with the charter from its founder from the mid-19th century to provide free science education for children and adults. They have wonderful programs. They have an amazing building. And tomorrow night is their Sip of Science fundraiser. So I put a link in the chat for people. If you are interested in coming, please come. There are still tickets available. If you can't come, please just go onto the Wagner website and take a look at some of their free programs. They really do have an amazing set of programs for adults and children all around. Thanks.
Thank you for sharing that. Appreciate you jumping in and weighing in on that. I told you we had a busy docket. If you have anything else that you want to throw in the chat that you'd like to share with the group, please do so. Marcia, do you want to jump in here and share a little bit about what's upcoming at DAG?
Sure. Thanks, Eli, and hi, everyone. Our December meeting will look at financial incentives for rehabilitation projects. Panelists will talk about how recent changes in zoning and tax laws, plus an increase in Pennsylvania historic tax credit are making it easier and more financially feasible to rehabilitate older vacant buildings and return them to productive use. What could be better? Our speakers include Paul Stanke, Executive Director of the Preservation Alliance, and Justin Kaplan, Director of Development at Odin Development, and Philip Balderston, who is the founder and CEO at Odin, and David Waxman, Managing Partner of Partners. That's Thursday, December 5th at 10 a.m. on Zoom. And then moving into the new year, we begin with a bang. We have 2 events scheduled for January. On the 16th, Jesse Lawrence, Philadelphia's new Director of Planning and Development, will be meeting with us. And this will be a one-on-one event at the Center for Architecture at 5:30 in the evening. And on January 22nd, we've invited several cultural leaders who are at the helm of our 250th anniversary celebration. And they will be sharing their vision and their ideas for citywide arts and design projects. You won't want to miss this in-person evening event. And the opportunity for you as artists, architects, and designers to discover how to get involved in the celebration and how to create partnerships and with cultural centers and communities. So it will be great to begin the new year on a high note. Thanks, Eli.
Thank you, Marcia. Nika just dropped that in the chat there if you want to go get our get signed up for our December meeting. A couple more things and we'll dive into our program. We've also reached out to Octavia Howell, the new Director of Planning. She's a DAG returning champion, having shared with us during her role at Pew. So we will try to get her in for a one-on-one as well, so we can ask her a bunch of questions. It is that time of year. We are rolling out the annual funding ask, the Dig Deep for DAG for 2024. We're doing more programming than ever. We're in person again quite a bit. So our costs are there. They're not enormous, but they are there. So we are asking folks if you are able to head to our website, and Nika hopefully will drop that in the chat as well, and send a few dollars our way so that we can continue to provide the programming that we provide and the advocacy work as well. So we appreciate your continued support. And one of the new things we are adding in 2025 as we've continued to grow our programming into some really large and interesting policy and design conversations, we want to get back to a focus on some more micro project-based programming. So we are going to introduce a series that we're calling the DAG Spotlight, where we're going to be looking at projects. It'll be a 1 hour entirely on Zoom program that we're going to be kicking off in January, looking at architectural design, preservation, planning, all sorts of interesting topics, but it'll be specifically focused on one project. So we have a bunch of those that are going to be coming on online for you to sign up for in the coming weeks, but keep your eyes open and look for those, as we'll be sending around e-blasts announcing those new programs as they come to supplement our regular monthly meetings. So we'll have more programming and more content as we jump into the new year. So that's a lot of stuff to start us off. Appreciate your patience as we get through all of this advocacy and DAG business. We are going to jump into our program. We will have a Q&A at the end. So as you have questions for our panel, please put them in the chat. We'll do our best to get every one of them answered. And with that, let me introduce Bill Marazzo, the CEO of WHYY, who's going to lead off and introduce our team here and really jump into the meat of our program. Take it away, Bill.
Bill, your
Right.
mic is muted.
Well, I'll try it now. Good morning.
There you are. Thank you.
Yeah, one would think somebody who works for a media company could figure this Zoom stuff out by now, but there we go. Eli, thank you for the introduction, and Marcia, thank you for the invitation. I think we'd be remiss if I didn't reflect upon the work of DAG. It's interesting as I listened to you all this morning to recognize that as civic leaders, what you're trying to tackle is tough work. I would say, though, as a resident of the city, very few tough things lend themselves to simple solutions. So, keep swinging, keep at it. And at some point on a net basis, I'm sure you'll be successful. So we thank you for that. Yeah, I'm here this morning as a representative of the Independence Historical Trust, which a little more than 5.5 years ago, as a piece of its own strategic planning, instigated what is now known as the Vision Framework. The Vision Framework, I would quickly point out, was the artifact of looking at a boatload of data, which, as you all know, sort of starts and ends with the fact that no other urban center in the United States has more historical assets per capita than we do here in the city of Philadelphia. I mean, that's a fact. And on the other side of the richness of that data point is another interesting data point. Pick your favorite quarter. 2 times as many people come to Philadelphia to visit the Rocky statue as opposed to visiting the Liberty Bell. So if you accept those 2 facts as strategic bookends, the work that the trust has been trying to do is to figure out how to get a collaborative vision for capital improvements throughout the city's historical area. And we quickly recognized that we did not want, as a community, for super well-intentioned and capable organizations that were tending to various aspects of the richness of our city's historic area, but were not particularly well connected to each other. So the trust took a bold swing to try to behave as a catalyst, to bring 2 or more organizations together with a common sense of vision for the historical area, and then to identify a short stack of projects which, if implemented, could build some muscle inside of our civic community that would make collaboration and leveraging of limited financial resources much more effective. We have 3 fundamental elements of our vision for this work. One is to see how to progress through these capital improvements in ways that it can become incrementally more pedestrian than vehicular friendly for both citizens and tourists. We wanted to find strategies that would make it easier for people to visit the historic area in ways that we could overall activate some positive energy about the learnings that can occur inside the historic area. And then finally, while there are some very obvious and spectacular exhibitions of our nation's founding populated throughout the historic area, there are some big gaps in things that are not being interpreted at all or fully interpreted, and over time we hope to fill in those gaps. What we have in front of you here is just a sampling of a subset of the organizations who we have worked with in a sense as a steering committee to come up with this vision framework. And I'm really pleased to say, thanks to my colleagues who are joining me here this morning, that we are shoveling the ground on a couple of projects which excite us in ways that we think many others can be done using that collaborative management model. So I will stop there and introduce to you all the Director of Planning and Urban Design at FCA, Eric Calippo, who we selected to support the preparation of the vision framework after a national competition for such expertise. And Eric, you might want to bring to the attention of these DAG members some of the goals of the vision framework.
Also having trouble unmuting. Thank you, Bill, for that introduction. I also want to make sure to point out that we're joined here by other members of our coalition who've been instrumental in developing the initial vision framework, and we'll talk a little bit about how the framework as a vision for the historic district has really started to bring in a great number of other partners and collaborators who are finding their own ways to contribute and sort of move the vision in the right direction. I think fundamentally vision planning is based on the idea that you don't have all the answers, but you can figure them out together as you move forward. And so we're joined by Job Itzkowitz, who's the executive director of Old City District, as well as Jonathan Burton, who is the Director of Development for the Independence Historical Trust, and Kelly Yemen, who is the Director of the Office of Multimodal Planning for the City of Philadelphia. And so we've all worked together over the past couple of years to both articulate the vision framework and to see how some of the projects can move forward. And so, as Bill mentioned, the framework started with a core set of organizations and over time has been able to expand to include many others who see the opportunity to contribute to that vision and sort of think about how collaboration works together across organizations. And so the vision framework process began actually in 2021 at the height of the COVID-19 pandemic. And we were experiencing at that time a broad decline in visitation, both through just the fact that people were not congregating in public, and we really started to ask questions about what the future of the district was. And ultimately, as we worked with all of the partner organizations, what was decided was a broader vision of a pedestrian-focused district that sort of, doesn't necessarily have hard boundaries, but soft boundaries beginning at the Independence National Historic Park and continuing all the way to the river, that has an engaging and active public realm, and that tries to advance an accurate and representative interpretation of histories and narratives throughout the district that both elevate our understanding of the founding of the United States, but also incorporate the contributions of Native, Indigenous, and BIPOC residents, BIPOC contributors to our national narratives. And the goals of the plan really set about to do 5 things. That was to improve the visitor experience, to support the restoration of tourism and economic activity within the district, to improve movement and access through redesign and kind of modifications to streets, sidewalks, public spaces, and gathering areas, to find places where activities and programs could be better supported throughout the district. And then, as Bill mentioned, to develop partnerships that bring multiple organizations together. And I think this is probably fundamentally one of the most important things is, Bill mentioned that there are more historical assets and organizations within the district that really are working towards their individual missions, and it may not be within their capacity to address how public space is designed or how streets are designed, but when they kind of come together and figure out a vision to move forward together, that elevates the opportunity to make real progress for how the district can be perceived, used, and experienced by both visitors and residents. Now, also, as Bill mentioned, there is the idea that the area we studied is a historic district. I think it's important to remind ourselves that the purpose of historic, there are different purposes to historic districts, and I think We began with the idea that this would be heading towards supporting activities and programs around the 250th, the semi-quincentennial of the signing of the Declaration of Independence. And so there's an act of commemoration that happens in historic districts that is central to why they exist. And many of you who have already spoken eloquently about the Roundhouse and other buildings in the area. Have I? Nope. Has my internet become unstable, or am I
We
still?
can hear
Oh,
you
yeah.
just fine. We just can't see
Okay,
you.
great. That's probably better. And so those of you who've spoken eloquently about preservation, especially within, you know, the modernist era, there's an active preservation that happens in these districts. And then finally, interpretation. So our goal is to make sure that all three of those things are supported throughout the district. And you really don't have to make up a historical story about Philadelphia. You can turn a corner, you don't even need to scratch the surface to find any number of historical sites, artifacts, places that really speak to the tremendous history of place. And I would say that is rare and very special about some of the the character of downtown Philadelphia that makes it unique from other places. But fundamentally, it is the programs that people participate in, the places that people go, the activities that exist there that need to be supported to draw people in, to create the levels of activity that are necessary for people to recognize the importance, to understand and experience the stories and the narratives, and also to interact with each other. The streets are where we learn from each other. The streets are where we come together. The streets are the great equalizer and the great democratic place of our nation. And this is an opportunity to improve some of those, experiences. Unfortunately, the condition of some of the, streets and spaces in Philadelphia have, fallen into some state of disrepair. And the goal of the plan was to figure out how to elevate the experience, to improve the design, to make things safer, to make access and movement easier. And so that was sort of the outcome of what we developed were 5 strategies for seeing how that could happen. And that was establishing a network of primary streets that are focused on mobility and activation, creating a system of smaller connective pathways that are anchored by historic and cultural assets, investing in signature open spaces that connect to adjacent neighborhoods, figuring out how to unite a continuous gateway that defines the edge of the district and sort of creates a sense that of knowing when you come in and come out, when you're entering and leaving the district, and also a kind of wayfinding system that's based in open space rather than in streets. And then finally, instilling a sense that there are all sorts of signifiers that might exist already and can exist in the future to help people understand that that this is a special place, and it promotes a unified identity of the district. And so this has taken on some different forms, but it's both in historical statuary, but hopefully future investments in public art, public infrastructure, and things like transportation head houses, reduction in overall regulatory signage, lighting, anything that really helps people understand that there is a unified place that is to be experienced here. And when we put that all together, what we think is there's a comprehensive network of active streets and public spaces that support placemaking, interpretation, and also things like economic development, as well as really expanding the narratives that and the stories that are told for people when they visit. Now, the overall vision of the framework started as a kind of guidepost for us to identify a series of priority projects that would serve as catalysts for people to understand the possibility and then help others plug into how that works in the future if they have other projects that sort of head in the same direction of the vision. And so the map shown here identifies the 6 in either red or blue, the 6 priority projects that were the initial catalysts for the vision framework, and that's Tamanend Plaza and the Market Street Road Diet, modifications to Commerce Street Walkway. I'll talk about all of these as we move forward. Changes to the to Race Street around Franklin Square, and then also a reimagining of Dock Street and as a kind of gateway from the south into the historic district. And since some of those projects have gotten off the ground, other folks who have seen the progress of the vision framework have reached out and begun doing their own collaborative fundraising and design processes. And so we call those kind of like expansions of the vision framework, and that's both a new study that is underway to think about how the I-95 Cap Park along Front Street connects to the Road Street, to the Market Street improvement project being implemented by the city, as well as changes around the Benjamin Franklin grave site. And these were both projects that were initiated by other partners that were not initially part of the vision framework or priority projects, but recognize how the momentum has built and how people are starting to understand that you can make progress incrementally rather than thinking about it all at once. And so we produced a series of vision renderings as part of the vision framework. The one shown here imagines a new gateway from the south part of the district along Dock Street, looking at the Merchant Exchange building, where a kind of reclaiming of the over allocated street bed in the upper right-hand corner, you can kind of see an existing conditions picture. And sort of building off the idea that the street is meant for really more activities, and you don't need that much to just accommodate moving vehicles and parked vehicles, but that a market environment which harkens back to the original purpose of Dock Street, as well as plaza spaces, seating, and maybe inlaid granite pavers to allow biking to be more readily accommodated, and also adding to the general accessibility of the space. This project represents a vision for a narrowing of 6th Street as it heads down from Race towards towards Independence Hall and Market Street, thinking about how existing plazas that are part of both the National Constitution Center, WHYY Plaza, and many of the federal buildings that line 6th Street can be reinvigorated with programming, some landscape changes, and just a broad reduction of the road bed in order to expand pedestrian connectivity north-south through the district. And then speaking about signifiers, thinking about what color schemes or sort of street furniture might be more consistently deployed throughout the district to help people understand that this is a common area where there's a lot to be learned and a lot to be experienced. This image shows a picture of Race Street that we envisioned early on in 2021. Since then, some of these improvements have actually been implemented. There has been a road diet on Race Street, and we are hopeful that over time, some of that will be expanded into permanent expansions of the pedestrian public realm, as well as thinking about how enlivening the edge of Franklin Park can be about inviting people into that experience as well. Now, up to this point, the 3 projects that I've spoken about are still in the conceptual phase and things that we hope will gain momentum. But projects that are underway and have been the result of partnerships between the Independence Historic Trust and other members of the sort of coalition that formed the vision framework. The first is modifications to the Commerce Street Walkway. And so I'm going to invite Joe Bitskowitz, who's the director of Old City District, to talk a little bit about how this project came about, how this sort of concept really is under implementation. So why don't you step in for a second, Joe?
Great. Thanks, Eric. Thanks, Bill. And thanks, Eli, and everyone at DAG. Always a pleasure to be back speaking before you, though I like in person because then I don't have to pick up my own coffee. But I did that today anyway. So I'm the executive director of the Old City District, and some of these projects grew out of our vision document from 2016. We did research talking about where people revealed to us they wanted more people in the neighborhood and they wanted better modes. They preferred biking, they preferred walking, and they did not want to drive more, nor did they want more people driving more. They also wanted great public spaces, and we'll touch upon one of them when Eric goes into Tamanin Plaza. But this was also an opportunity for an improved public space. And so was the corner lot at the corner of 2nd and Elfreth's Alley. And so the Old City District had applied for a community design collaborative grant for that corner lot. And a lot of our conversation, a lot about what we talk about during these presentations is collaboration and partnership. We have a tree tender group in Old City called Old City Green. It was born out of the now defunct Old City Civic Association. And Old City Green, led by Joe Schiavo and Janet Coulter, really had a vision for how Commerce Street could be improved. But we had already applied for a community design collaborative grant, and we couldn't lead that effort. So Old City Green ended up leading that effort with support from us, the American Bible Society, which was then new to the neighborhood, and the Independence Visitor Center. And, you know, while this sort of looks like a back alley and a passive space, it also provides a direct connection from the Visitor Center across 5th Street, past Mikveh Israel, across 4th Street. And as we are now looking eastbound in this rendering, you can then connect to what is presumably Oriana Street, north and south to Market Street. And then should you cross Market, you would end up at the Benjamin Franklin House. And then if you cross Chestnut, at Carpenter's Hall. And so this project presented an opportunity not just to create some additional green space in the neighborhood, but also to create a passage that would be pedestrian friendly, pedestrian priority. Some additional background: we didn't know who owned this parcel, and neither did the city. The city, we'd reached out to Councilman Squilla's office when we were trying to figure it out. They went to the law department, and law figured out that this parcel was city owned. It was transferred by paid in 1970 to Streets, so it was it's a right of way. Streets assigned it to Parks and Rec at that same moment, so it should have been on Parks and Rec inventory, and it wasn't. And so for 50 years, no one had been paying attention to this space. It was flooded, cars were parking illegally there, and that sort of drew the need, and that happened to fit in with a lot of the goals that all of the groups in the neighborhood were working towards. Eric, am I missing anything on that?
No, I think, you know, how this project essentially relates to the broader framework, the broader vision framework is all I would add, which is to say, when we first began our outreach to the many organizations who contributed to the initial framework, what we heard was that there was no, there were a lot of lists of all of the places to visit throughout the district. And, you know, even Historical Philadelphia Inc., who runs the storytelling benches throughout the district, says they give a card to give a card out to families. And if they visit these X number of historical sites and they show up at Franklin Park, they get a free ice cream cone. And that parents arrive looking fundamentally exhausted from trying to visit 35 sites. And you know, what the purpose of these smaller pathways, which are a feature of the historical fabric of Philadelphia, is it tries to break down the experience of visiting the district into sort of more bite-sized chunks. And so it really anchors pathways in the experience of being able to touch on a few things rather than just seeing the district as a confetti of many different places. And so these types of pathways link the visitor center to Franklin Court and directly to Carpenter's Hall, making something that almost feels like a curated walk rather than just a sort of like a big, a big bunch of things. And so there's a lot of other opportunities for things like that to happen, and has even influenced how the visitor center has been speaking about breaking the district down into a set of curated pathways and things like that. Yeah. All right, I'll move on to the next one. So in addition, Market Street really represented a huge opportunity. And at the beginning of the process, what we envisioned for Market Street was a road diet with kind of thinking about how the intersections and the bump outs and bike lanes might be added. as well as figuring out ways for non-traditional entrepreneurs to contribute to the vitality of some of the blocks that are maybe less active because of the large sizes of the contemporary buildings that were built between the Independence National Historic Park and the older character that exists deeper into Old City. And so we started with a set of vision renderings to build consensus around that, around a project that would modify Market Street. And so I'm going to invite Kelly Yemen to talk a little bit about first the Market Street Road Diet, or I'm sorry, the Market Street Improvement Project that resulted, and where the city and the Independence Historical Trust and Old City District have come together to really think about a new vision for Market Street.
Thanks, Eric. Yeah, so this project really started when Old City District began their visioning process back in 2016 in kind of that wholesale visioning for Old City and brought the city in as far as what could we do on Market Street. And again, back to kind of what Job was saying about what do the residents, what do businesses really, what do they see as the future for the district? And it was really multimodal. So how could we lean into that and transforming the street here? And then I think TrustWorks really came in and brought it to the next level with especially some of the work at Second and Market. We'll talk about it in a second. So here we can see what it looks like today with the 4 lanes. This project has NTP. Construction will be starting any second as we head towards 2026, but it took multiple years of fundraising. The grant list is long on this project to get support from PennDOT, DCED. We even have some HUD funding that Bill and the Trust were able to bring in. So RACP, just any of the word salad, ARLI, all the different acronyms you can think of for funding are here playing a bit to bring this project where we'll be road dieting, bringing raised protected bike lanes, new bus boarding islands, really in the hopes of transforming the corridors. We want to go to the next slide. This is the more kind of traditional, although we are excited to be doing raised bike lanes in this section. But then at Second and Market, I think we're doing something really special.
Yeah. And, you know, I Job, if you want to step in and talk about how this really started early in 2016, and here we are, it's 2024. Is that, yeah, it's 2024. You know, the long tail of, you know, visioning like this, really, it's the wheels of progress turn slowly, but they do turn.
Yeah, and this is really the best part of the story for me. I mean, not the 8-year plan, but we all get a 2-year credit where everything was put on hold. But like I said, we did this research in 2015, and the research showed this is what people wanted. They didn't express it as such, but that I sort of alluded to it. They wanted to drive less and bike more, and we needed to do something that allowed for that. And the city stepped up and said, okay, we're going to adopt this plan. And we said, great, because the fact is, like, our organization is very small. We have a $1 million budget. We do not have the capacity nor the right to design city streets or build them, nor could we raise the funds independently that cost this much. So the city adopted it. And then we had this other part of the project that Kelly alluded to that we said, okay, well, we'll let that go. And then Bill and the trust stepped in and said, no. Let's get this done. So it was really a really nice story, even though it took longer, in part because we were putting multiple pieces of this puzzle together. The outcome is going to be spectacular.
Yeah. And so what both Kelly and Job are alluding to is the Market Street Improvement Project, which runs from, Kelly, correct me if I'm wrong, 5th Street to 2nd Street, really focused on the roadbed of Market Street. And that's right outside James Wilson Park, Christchurch Park. A lot of people call it different things, but the open space that's just to the south of Christchurch. And there was, that intersection, Second and Market, really represents the 100% corner of Old City District, and is also a sort of gateway into the district if you arrive via SEPTA on the Market Frankfurt line. And so emerging at that place, it felt like it needed to be something a little bit different than the rest of the road diet project that is slated for Market Street. And so as part of the vision framework, we worked with our constituents to develop a broader vision, which does a couple of things. And so this rendering is where we started in 2021, imagining the statue of Chief Tamanend, which is currently located at Front and Market at the on-ramp to I-95, to be relocated and to rededicate the area with significant pedestrian improvements, a raised plaza, shared spaces, all of that, and to rededicate that as Tamanend Plaza in honor of the contributions that Native and Indigenous persons have made to the founding of both the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania and to the Republic of the United States. And now, since then, that design has evolved, and this is the current sort of working rendering produced by the city. And Kelly, Bill, and Job, I invite you to sort of talk about how the expansion of Tamanend Plaza really represents this broad collaboration between organizations to get something done.
I'll maybe start with some of the design elements that we're putting in at this area. While this just shows the kind of approach to the Market Bridge, this full area will be a curbless street from Strawberry, which is a very small street, on Market Street, approaching 2nd Street, around the corner to Church. It will become cobbles with special pavers. We'll be again creating this curbless street, planter protected bike lanes, this new pedestrian area at the confluence of Market, where Market goes both up and down, to really create a place at 2nd and Market. And so I think this is kind of taking that original vision that Eric and Bill brought to us, working through what I should remind everybody, this is still a PennDOT road. Working through a lot of the requirements, looking at PennDOT and requirements there, how to handle all the traffic that is still coming through this area, but also signaling to drivers this is a special place, so that cobble, that extra little bit of rumble, to slow people down, as well as that raised kind of larger raised street, raised intersection around the kind of surrounding Wilson Park, kind of framing that area. I don't know if Bill or Joe want to jump in and talk about what won't be in this.
It might be useful for the group to listen to Job talk about the longer term maintenance of these improvements, or stated another way, we all know that even when we have a successful civic / public improvement project, absent any ongoing maintenance resources, those improvements fall into a sadder state. So these projects that we're trying to summarize for you here, probably too quickly, also have an ongoing maintenance requirement to them. So maybe, Job, you might talk about that. And Eric, with your permission, maybe Jonathan can chime in and talk about how the philanthropic community is reacting to these kinds of collaborations.
Sure. Thanks, Bill. So as I mentioned, we don't have the capacity to do this sort of capital work, but we do have the capacity to do ongoing maintenance, especially the type that we're talking about here, which is part of what our basic role is today: cleaning, greening. Our responsibility will not be, anything in the cartway. Fortunately, we are not allowed to take on that responsibility. But when it comes to planters, stickers, graffiti, keeping things planted every year, that will fall to us, and that should be, knock on wood, a light lift for us. And the same goes for Commerce Street, where we'll be able to keep that, swept every day, free of graffiti and stickers.
Well,
I-
And Jonathan, do you want to reflect for a moment or two about
Sure.
the impact of these collaborations on fundraising?
Exactly. So, it was mentioned by Kelly earlier that the trust raised some funding from HUD through some bills working on that from a few years ago, and taking those applications and the grant language for those applications. Then we worked with the Old City District to get RACP funding for these projects, as a good example of a collaborative spirit to pool our resources, pool our content, and get these applications in. The trust also does collaborative fundraising for non-infrastructure projects, like with Carpenter's Hall and their education programming. The key is to, Philadelphia sports teams are so competitive, but the nonprofits need to put the swords down and work together, because we have, this is clearly a heavy lift. It's a large geographic area surrounding the national park and even in the national park, for which is the reason why we have a historic district to begin with, because of the preservation of those assets. So it's thinking collectively, working together. There's some initiatives with the visitor center to get all the partners together to work together, and not only fundraising but advocacy, marketing, programming, events, and things like that. So we have a good opportunity here to work together.
Yeah. I'll also respond to a question in the chat about why was this arrangement chosen over what was shown in the vision rendering. Well, it's important to remember that when you're doing a vision plan, what you want to do is present an idea, something that is, seems achievable. And then when projects become real, a whole set of constraints comes into place that you might not necessarily know about at the initial initial ideation sessions. And what this represents was what was sort of possible within the constraints of, the roadbed, where PennDOT was willing to imagine a new structure being placed. But I would say that doesn't necessarily mean it's better or worse. It's just different. And so there's also some small changes that really change some of the fundamental relationships we have to the elements within this place. This island that you're seeing here is actually a significant expansion of the existing island that you see in the upper right-hand corner, creating a much better pedestrian refuge for people to make the crossing Market Street, which is very wide at this point, into a more manageable distance. It creates a real place for folks to observe and understand the importance and meaning of the statue of Chief Tamanend, who was the leader of the Lenape people when the treaty for Pennsylvania was negotiated with William Penn. And the height of the statue is also lowered quite significantly from where it is at the entrance to the I-95, kind of creating a better, more human relationship and being able to understand the many different elements of that statue, even how it's kind of hard to perceive that he is in fact standing upon the back of a turtle, that there's an eagle on his shoulder. There's all of these, kind of elements that really become more visible and more tactile as part of that experience. And so I think, as we've moved on with the vision framework, other partners have sort of engaged with the trust to figure out how they might contribute to that larger vision. And so more recently, Bill and Jonathan have been working with Christ Church to reimagine how the space around the Franklin gravesite might look and function as a place within the historic district. And so this is a lot of the same types of improvements within the roadbed, creating bump outs and planters, protected bike lanes, and also creating an appropriate setting in which people can both sort of rest and commemorate and look at and experience and reinterpret the meaning of Benjamin Franklin's final resting place being there. And Jonathan, I think this is probably a good opportunity for you to jump in and really talk about how collaborative fundraising is what is enabling these small projects to move forward.
Yes, absolutely. So Bill and I, we both met with, the staff and the board of Christ Church to discuss this type of a project for which we can, do collaboratively. We have a letter of support from Christ Church. When we get to the point of, well, we've started fundraising for it, but when we get to the point where we need to potentially raise more money than our initial outreach, yes, we will talk to their constituents because they have an appetite to fix this area up. So we will work together to find those funds, whether it's grant support, individual support, government support, whatever we can find. Just like Kelly had to do with the Market Street project, you have to find it.
And then I think the message there is it really does take a village. It's not, you can't, none of this can happen, one person or one organization just doing it on their own. And so, this is probably a good, opportunity for us to close out, maybe take some questions. And Bill, if you have anything to add here.
Yeah, thank you ever so much, Eric. But could you flip back to the original rendering of Tonoman Plaza, see if we can tackle with Eli's permission a couple of questions that are in the chat. For those of you who may not know, in this image on the left side is the red brick building is Christ Church. In this particular rendering, the open space to the immediate south of Christ Church is all open. At the moment, that open space is covered, about a third of it is covered by a 9-foot high brick wall. The balance of which on that property is covered by a wrought iron fence that's probably comparable in size. This asset was acquired by Congress on behalf of the National Park Service in 1964 to create an open vista from Market Street to Christ Church. For reasons we don't need to get into this morning, the brick wall was put up and then the wrought iron fence was put up actually in 1964. National Park Service has taken the position that those walls are quote unquote historic because they were erected before, I think it's 1966, when park regulations established anything built to that point would be designated as historic. So we are still working with the National Park Service. The current superintendent is far more open than his predecessor to exploring opportunity to take those walls down and open up Wilson Park to become a much more significant part of the activity we anticipate around Tonoman Plaza.
I'd also like to, somebody in the chat made some really detailed remarks about the treatment of the statue. All of the movement of the statue is being negotiated in conjunction with the chiefs of the Lenape people and the artist Raymond Sandoval, and still under design and under consideration. And so none of those changes will be done without the involvement of the original artist and the indigenous people who are descendant of him.
And then if you could just finally, Eric, forward to the current Tonoman Plaza configuration. Yeah, that guy right there. There's a question or two in the chat about the functionality of the ramp on the left side of this rendering, the so-called Market Street ramp. We have just begun, we the trust with OCD and SEPTA and PennDOT and the Delaware River Waterfront Corporation, we've just begun a series of ideation meetings in an effort to try to see if there's a good design rationale for first and foremost turning over the land that now supports the southbound I-95 ramp at Market and Front, turn it back over to OCD, and then rethink this entire space around Tonoman Plaza so that it can become a better connection to the new I-95 park.
There was an interesting little back and forth in the chat about loading and the logistics of how this works because when these public improvements are made, it does create some new challenges. So Kelly, do you want to just speak to some of the approaches and plans for that type of service work?
Yeah, so we did a detailed parking analysis and observation to see how both current loading, parking, there's a lot of special parking, especially with media parking in the area. So we did a full parking plan of what's there, observations on how it's currently being used, and then have new parking regulations that will roll out with this plan as far as where we needed more loading, you know, putting in appropriate amounts of loading zones, especially during the day when, like, we see that Pepsi truck in the upper corner where we need that type of loading. And then in the evening, especially on the south side, a lot of need for TNC, you know, Uber, Lyft, taxi drop off. So some of that parking converting to other types of loading in the evening hours where that's maybe not as needed on the north side. So we're kind of right sizing those regulations along the corridor. And then there's also juggling, how do we do that during construction? This will be impactive construction. It will start this year. So there's a construction about, will we see construction in 2024? Knock on wood, yes. We have full notice to proceed for the contractor. Granite curbs should be starting to be installed and modifications starting at 6th and moving towards 2nd. There will be we will be one-waying Market Street for duration of this project to ensure it can be completed by 2026. And a lot of loading will be moved to side streets in that interim construction period. So on things like 3rd Street and the like, to handle loading during construction. But in the final configuration, it's a change of the regulations.
Do you want to talk a little bit more about timeline and phasing, and is there any more sort of layering that you can share with us as you get started?
Don't have the final, it is with the contractor right now. We have what the design engineers put together as a phasing plan, but then that goes to the contractor. They're going to be putting together their final plan. We should be getting that any minute. As far as look like, but what we're seeing is come this spring and summer, we'll be one-waying Market Street, maintaining the eastbound connection to the ramp and the SEPTA loop, which is very important for SEPTA to keep access at all times to their end of line, which is at Front and Market. So we'll be keeping that direction, but westbound will be closed for a period of time to allow the construction to be accelerated on Market Street with detours over to Arch, and then moving some of the layover spots. A lot of this has had to be coordinated with a 95 cap that has also moved a lot of bus layovers and bus stops. So we've done a lot of it close coordination. Luckily, this is much faster construction. We should be done inside of 18 months than the multi-year process for the 95 cap. But really our goal is to be out of here by early 2026.
And Kelly, since you're on a roll here, one more. The layering in of all the tourism-based vehicles that are not the loading for the businesses, how is that factored into your thinking about where they're stopping, dropping off, loading?
They don't have as much loading on this corridor as at least in this area. So they won't be able to stop during construction from 6th to 2nd, but a lot of their main stops are up at they'll be able to maintain, not impacting Market and 6th as much. It's kind of Market from 6th to 2nd. So they will be detoured, but again, if a SEPTA bus can do it, a tour bus can do it. So that's been our design vehicles.
Sounds good. Susanna Barocco, do you want to jump in and ask your question? I just want to make sure we're clear and I get it right.
Oh, my question was already answered in the chat. I had asked about opening up the cemetery where Franklin is buried, and it won't be completely opened. It was my misunderstanding.
Ah, gotcha.
Thank-
Yes.
It-
So go ahead.
I could respond very quickly. There's actually already an opening in the wall there that is a wrought iron fence. It just creates a space outside of that for observation to happen in a more kind of comfortable fashion. Right now, it's just blank sidewalk. There's actually a really great analog to this that happened in New York City as the result of the Hamilton musical. The visitation to the Hamilton gravesite at Trinity Church became so overwhelming they had to shut down access to the main cemetery and only allow viewing of the gravesite from the street end. And so I believe New York City is also in the process of creating some extra space on the sidewalk for that to happen. And so this kind of looks at that sort of model where we're not suggesting, and Christchurch is not suggesting allowing people into the cemetery, but allowing better observation of the gravesite from outside the cemetery.
Thanks.
Jonathan, you just dropped some interesting information in about Wilson Park. Do you want to share a little more about that?
Sure. So Wilson Park is owned by Independence National Historical Park. The Old City District, Job, I guess 5, maybe 6 years ago, worked on renderings in conjunction with the Park Service. But considering there's new administration, potentially new ideas around the park, like opening up additional entrances to the park, we hope to receive a word on a grant very soon from the state of Pennsylvania to engage the public in commenting on new designs. So we'll find out soon, maybe hopefully in the next couple of weeks, if we receive the grant. And then any of that information will then drive, how we think about the construction of the park.
Yeah, and let me just add in there that when that came out of the vision document where we had this concept and we started doing the study in 2017 for Market Street, it was we could look at the corridor 2nd to 6th, we could look at the plaza environment at 2nd to Market, and we could look at the park on the northwest corner of 2nd to Market. And while they all work independently, had we only been able to do one of those things, it would have been a functional great improvement. They work best when all three are interlocked together. And so that plaza design, as you can see from this rendering, is designed as an extension of that park space. So it's important to improve the park within that as well.
There have been a couple of questions about bike lanes and how wide they are and what the planning process has been, but make sure that we now have e-bikes that can come ripping up on the side of a bike rider and overtake them, and making sure that there's enough width to allow for that to happen safely.
Yeah, we're
Kelly, yeah.
balancing a lot of widths in a constrained corridor. And so while in the one picture we had, it does look like we have about like half foot or half 6 feet where we could move things around. If we went 1 block on either side,
We'll do this afternoon.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
That narrow kind of gore in is actually us narrowing it to get any width we could when we could, but ensure that we also have turn lanes where we need them. So we were fighting for inches. There's also a lot of very interesting utilities under here, but we do maintain minimum kind of bike lane widths and buffers throughout the corridor. There will be one section where the bike lane even has to go down onto pavement level just around the Franklin Post Office due to pedestrian crowds, and really that was our big concern there, was at pedestrian crowding locations like the Franklin Post Office, as well as at bus stops. We'll have either the bike will go down to pavement level, or there will be lateral guidance kind of indicating to pedestrians that they're crossing over a bike lane, especially if they're visually impaired, so that when they're getting to a bus stop, that conflict is really highlighted. But it is designed not to be for the fastest bicyclist, but to be for, let's say, the average Indigo rider. And if somebody wants to go 20 miles an hour, they are still legally allowed to use the roadway. But that was not the design vehicle for this roadway.
William Scott, can you jump in and share your question? I just want to make sure it gets stated accurately.
Yeah, thank you. It's back to the ramp that's in the rendering for the second rendering for the Tamanan Plaza, which would be at the foot of Second and Market, that one. And I think what I determined in terms of Kelly's conversation is that at the end of the construction of the park over 95, that ramp will be back in service as part of the SEPTA loop that goes. So, okay, that was the question. Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
The
Thank you very much.
Viaduct will, as we talk about ramps, there's the kind of the Chestnut to Market viaduct, a ramp.
Okay,
Layovers for SEPTA, that will be back after the 95 cap construction. SEPTA will return to laying over there. Then there's the 95 ramp, just that is a major focus for vehicular traffic. That is being analyzed as part of the larger 95 work as far as where ramps should be, should not be. So that's part of that process as far as the 95 access ramp.
with that, I thank you very much for that. And since my microphone is still open, just let me put my 2 cents in and say very robustly, please move the statute to the other rendering site, because if it stays here with that ramp back in service as part of that loop, we're going to have a smaller but similar problem in terms of people wanting to see my ancestor that we currently have with the statue in its current location. So that's just my 2 cents. Take it up by Christ Church. It's much better.
Thank you for jumping in and sharing. As we sort of wrap up here, are there any links, social media handles, other things that you want to share with everyone so that they can stay up to date and apprised of all the goings on for this project?
Eli, I would just leave you all. Was that a question to us or to your members?
Yes, to you. That was to you guys. To
Yeah,
say
okay.
how can everyone stay apprised of what you guys are working on and the progress and stay in the loop?
So
we're in the process of developing a communications plan right now, for which we will utilize our website for the general public. But please sign up for our newsletter to receive. We'll eventually have that plan developed and finished to communicate to the public. Bill, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, thanks, Jonathan. Yeah, there's two points I'd like to add, Eli, with your permission. One is, as I think we've suggested along the way here in this conversation with you all, there are many organizations and institutions who have had a heavy hand in this thinking. And I just want to say I can't say enough, in particular, on behalf of the trust, about Kelly Yemen and her team, and Joe Bitzkowitz and his team, and many, many others. We've had a boatload of disagreements about big and small design points, but nothing has ever dropped into anyone becoming disagreeable. So, we feel good about the future of getting more stuff done inside the historic district as a result. And then, Eli, I have no idea if it's appropriate or not. One common element throughout this visioning is this notion of a signifier. From a physical standpoint, what will be our definition of a signifier that creates some commonality throughout the district that makes it easier for people to visually see how to move from point A to point B. And if your organization has an interest or a subcommittee that would like to work with the trust in trying to flush that out, we would be very grateful and very open to that.
Appreciate the opportunity, and we will certainly chat internally and hopefully take you up on that.
All right, great. Thank you.
So as we typically do here when we're on Zoom, if folks want to throw their cameras on and give our panel a round of applause. No need for microphones, just video will do. Thank you for joining us. It's very exciting to see not just the level of design, but the level of communication and collaboration and stakeholder buy-in that you all have really pushed for across this project. It's hopefully one that lots of other organizations will keep their eyes on and learn from as it keeps moving. And we hope you'll come check in with us and teach us some lessons learned as you build this thing and continue to develop the project. So thank you all for your time and sharing with us.
You're all very, very, very welcome. Thank you for having us.
So to wrap up the DAG year, December 5th, we will be back on Zoom talking about historic preservation incentives. That'll be a really good conversation. And in all likelihood, we will have 3 programs in January. So it's busy. There's a lot going on. If there's stuff we should be paying attention to that you don't think we are, send us an email at dagfellow@gmail.com. I just dropped a shameless plug for our fundraising campaign in the chat now. We appreciate the folks who do support, and it's great having everyone together. We'll be on Zoom in December, and then we'll be back in person a few times in January. Have a wonderful day. Thanks everyone for coming out, and we'll talk soon.
Thank you so much for the time.